Greetings and welcome to the SERU Research Symposium. I'm Igor Chirikov, and I'm a senior researcher and SERU Consortium Director at the Center for Studies in Higher Education at UC Berkeley. And today I'm going to share some preliminary results from the studies that I'm working on that looks at the relationship between the students' adaptation to online instruction in spring 2020 and the sense of belonging using SERU COVID-19 survey data. In the past 2 decades, there were a number of studies on the sense of belonging in relation to campus climate and student success. And in these studies, the sense of belonging usually refers to student perceived social and emotional support, the extent to which students feel connected to the universities, or valued by other students, faculty, and staff. And multiple studies, including those that are based on SERU and UQ's data, the studies reported that the sense of belonging is associated with positive academic outcomes, with student engagement, with retention and persistence. And so this is basically why universities are investing substantial resources to make sure students feel that they belong. And higher education researchers on the other side are trying to identify factors that strengthen the sense of belonging. So not surprisingly, that in previous studies, most of the factors that improve the sense of belonging were found to be associated with on-campus experiences and connections that students make on campus. But the COVID-19 pandemic basically forced most of the US universities to close their campuses and move instruction and student services online. So it's not clear what was the impact of this transition on students' sense of belonging. And understanding the relationship between online learning and the sense of belonging is important because even after the pandemic is over, at least some of the instruction, communication, and student services will either stay online or in a hybrid modality. I'm using SERU COVID-19 survey data to answer these questions. And the survey was a census survey administered at 9 public research-intensive universities from mid-May to mid-July 2020. As you see, the response rate varied from one institution to another, and from 13 to 41%. In total, we collected more than 34,000 responses from undergraduate students. And as shown on the slide, the survey included 5 topical areas that reflected primary concerns of SERU member institutions during the pandemic. We have more details about the sample at the CSHE website, but for this particular study, we are interested in academic experience and sense of belonging items. Before I jump to the results, I'll say a few words about the measures and study design. The survey asked students a series of Likert type questions on the sense of belonging and also on their transition to online instruction. The survey had 2 historical sense of belonging items shared with the previous SERU surveys. One is whether students felt valued at the university, and the other one is if students felt that they belong. And we also added one COVID specific item and asked if students felt that university supported them during the pandemic. To measure adaptation to online instruction, we asked students a direct question, how well they were able to adapt to online modality, and also asked about their satisfaction with instructors, the quality of online courses. So 2 factors were created using principal component analysis. Both factors have factor loadings for each item more than 0.8. So it's a pretty good scores. And as for the analytic approach, I first compared 2020 results on 2 individual sense of belonging items with the results from SERU surveys from 2018 and 2016 to see if there's any change. I also look at the change in the sense of belonging for both the overall sample and subpopulations. I then look at the adaptation to online instruction in 2020 by student subpopulations to identify potential covariates. And finally, I use unadjusted and covariate adjusted OLS regression models to analyze the association between the adaptation to online instruction and the sense of belonging. So to preview the results, first, I don't see a substantial drop in the sense of belonging in 2020 compared to the previous years. And second, the results indicate that there are significant disparities in both how students adapted to online instruction and in their sense of belonging. And finally, there is strong correlation between adaptation to online instruction and the sense of belonging, even after we control for covariates. So this is how 2020 results on the sense of belonging compare with previous years. We see that there's almost no change in the percentage of students who reported that they somewhat agree, or strongly agree that they feel valued as an individual at the university. So at this slide, look at the green bars, 77% in 2020. And the second one, that students feel they belong at the university, it's dark blue bars, 86% in 2020. I've also looked at the change by student subpopulations, and the results are quite stable across these different subpopulations. So it looks like the pre-COVID disparities in the sense of belonging, they continue to exist in 2020 with very limited change. Overall in the sample, we had 86% of students that felt they belong, but this percentage is lower among Black or African-American students, among American Indian or Alaskan Native students, among low-income and working class students, first-generation students, transgender and non-binary students, LGBTQ plus students, students with disabilities, and students who were caregivers during the pandemic. Now a few words about the transition to online instruction. Slightly less than 2/3 of undergraduate students reported they were satisfied with the quality of the courses and that would taught remotely during the spring term. And even more, 81% were satisfied with the support they received from the instructors. At the same time, only half of the students reported that they adapted well or very well to online instruction. And the most worrisome finding from our survey is that there are significant disparities in terms of how students adapted to online learning. Again, similar to the sense of belonging, overall in our sample, 51% of students indicated they adapted well or very well to online instruction. But if you look at Black students, Latinx students, low income and working class students, this percentage is significantly lower. And it is also lower for first generation students, for LGBTQ plus students, transgender and non-binary students, students with disabilities, students who were caregivers during the pandemic. The score is significantly lower. Finally, we see that there is a correlation between the adaptation to online instruction and the sense of belonging. The x-axis on this chart indicates the adaptation to online instruction factor scores in standard deviation, and y-axis is the average score for the sense of belonging factor. And it's quite easy to see that there's with the increase in the adaptation to online instruction factor score, the sense of belonging score also increases. And this association between the adaptation to online instruction and the sense of belonging is statistically significant in both unadjusted and covariate adjusted models when we additionally control for student demographics, like gender, race, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic background. We have social class, parental education, caregiving responsibilities, field and year of study, student status, transfer international, and GPA. It is also quite interesting to see what obstacles to online learning are associated with lower levels of sense of belonging. And let me explain this chart a little bit. So the bars indicate negative standard deviations from the mean sense of belonging score, which is 0, by obstacles to online instruction that students also reported in the survey. So basically, the higher the obstacle in this list, the lower the score for the sense of belonging factor. And despite very few students actually reported that they have experiences instances of bullying and harassment during their online classes, those students who experienced this, they have very low level, the lowest actually level of the sense of belonging. And other obstacles that are negatively related to the sense of belonging are the lack of access to technology, inability to access learning support services and academic advising, and inability to attend classes at their scheduled time. It's actually interesting that obstacles like the lack of interactions with other students or the lack of motivation for online learning are not that related to the lower level of the sense of belonging. So to summarize, this preliminary analysis basically shows that effective online instruction and supportive virtual campus services help students to develop a stronger sense of belonging. And there are at least 3 takeaways for higher education administrators planning for campus operations during and after the pandemic. First, institutions need to address disparities in online learning and develop targeted accommodations, especially for caregivers, for low-income or poor students, students with disabilities. And these accommodations can include recording lecture materials, expanding asynchronous delivery, expanding hours for learning support services, or at the instructional level, using trauma-informed pedagogies that recognize the experiences students going through and help them manage stress. Second, instructors and university administrators need to directly address and prevent online bullying, microaggressions, and harassment in classes to make sure that all students will feel welcomed in an online environment. The work in this area can include, for example, additional training for faculty and staff, how to recognize and manage disruptive online behavior. And finally, access to learning support services, faculty, and advisors is important to improve student sense of belonging going forward. Institutions need to prioritize resources and making sure this service is available to all students. Well, thank you so much for watching. I encourage you to watch other presentations from the SERU Research Symposium. And if you're interested in learning more about SERU and our SERU COVID-19 survey, visit the CCG website.